Good morning. It is now 11:03 a.m. and I will call the Sewage and Water Board Governance Committee meeting to order. Special counsel, please call the roll.
Director Scruggs,
Present.
Director Cole,
Here.
Director Kennedy. Here. Director Thomas.
Here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And I also like to point out for the record that Director Greenwich, Director Antrim, and Director Pedro are also present. Okay, I think we need to make a bit of an adjustment for practicality's sake to the agenda. I'd like to move item E to the top of the agenda. And so can I have a motion to make that adjustment, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded that we make an adjustment to put the 2026 legislative session and policy update by our chief of staff to the top of the line. I will note for directors, because this is an adjustment to the adjustment to the agenda, we will need a unanimous vote in order to make that happen, okay?
Of committee members only, right?
Yes, committee members only, exactly. Okay, any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All right, so with that, let's turn it over to Jamie Parker, our Chief of Staff, for our 2026 legislative session and policy update.
Okay, good morning, directors. Again, this is, thank you, an update on recent activity occurring in the legislative session. First, I'll start with House Bill 441. This is the civil service bill where we are seeking to repeal language that would require SWIBNO employees to transition to state civil service. So this would keep our employees in City of New Orleans civil service. That bill has passed the House of Representatives. It has been reported favorably by the Senate committee, and we are waiting for it to be debated and voted on by the full Senate. There's no indication at this time that there will be any issues with that. So things are moving along well on House Bill 441. House Bill 1243, which was formerly House Bill 573, is the bill that would give the City Council authority to adopt ordinances relative to a number of SWIBNO areas, including board composition, duties, responsibilities, budgets, employees, policies, and rates. That bill has started in the House and has passed the full House. It has gone to the Senate. It was reported favorably by the Senate Committee on Local and Municipal Affairs with amendments. It is now, the last time I checked, waiting to be scheduled for full discussion and vote by the Senate. And if it is approved, it will make its way back to the House where the amendments must be approved. Related to that bill, several weeks ago, in late April, the City Council endorsed or passed a resolution endorsing and supporting House Bill 573. So that's just to bring to the committee's attention. And then the other two bills that we're closely tracking are two related bills in the Senate that deal with our lead service line replacement program and allowing us to use public funding on private property for the replacement of lead service lines, and also to remove any statutory hindrances that would prevent us from doing so. So both of those have passed the Senate. They've been referred to the House, and that House Committee. Hearing is scheduled for this morning. And then finally, House Bill 893, which would streamline our current procurement processes and procedures, has also passed the House and is made its way to the Senate and has been referred to the appropriate committee, and we're waiting for that to be put on an agenda for hearing. And that's the update.
All right, thank you, Jamie. Are there any questions, discussion about any of the items in Jamie's update? Comments?
And with regards to going back to 1243, just kind of, some things that have been happening, considering it's still going to be delineated as a state entity, right? Like that's underlined and making sure that they are. Will the state be able to amend any compositions, changes that the city would make? Like does this language allows for that?
The amendment language?
Yeah.
The bill's amendment? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so when it's a state entity, but, yeah, the amendment right here.
Director Greenwich, I think Darren wanted to make a comment regarding that question.
Okay.
Good morning, committee members. In response to your questions of the most recent version of the bill as amended by the Senate Local and Municipal Affairs Committee, it removes that explicit statement that the public water, sewage, and drainage systems are a state entity separate and apart from the board.
Okay.
So that's no longer part of the bill. It's not explicitly stated, doesn't necessarily change what the board is defined as. And then I think you had a follow-up question about the ability to amend the composition of the board. So it would, currently it kind of allows the council to make rules and regulations affecting the term, appointment, and duties of board members. The change would defer directly to the Home Rule Charter. The Home Rule Charter at Section 5301 does currently contain a statement that says the mayor is a member of the board, and it kind of defines the composition as it exists now, with the exception that the mayor would no longer be the ex officio president. So if the bill is enacted, the composition would largely remain the same. But we wonder now whether it would require an amendment to the Home Rule Charter to make changes to the composition of the board. Unanswered question.
And what is consistent, the selection committee, excuse me, is out.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
And I'm sorry if I haven't caught up to it, but I know there's language about employees or all employees. Did we get that straightened out?
No, that's still there. That's still there.
So all employees is still,
But as I said before, problem with that is civil service. I mean, when it talks about all employees, the majority of the employees here at the Sewage and Water Board are civil service employees. So, and the Civil Service Commission certainly has authority over those.
okay. So that would supersede anything that's outlined here?
What I would like to say is that the civil service has exclusive jurisdiction over civil service classified employees.
Okay. And what about the ones classified as?
Unclassified employees,
Okay,
I would imagine could be subject to this,
okay.
Change in governance structure. Okay, any other questions, comments, Director
Okay.
Hazen?
One comment I want to make regarding House Bill 1243. I want to share that the Governors Committee, the impact House Bill 1243 is having on employees. Many are concerned about the uncertainty this bill brings. They are concerned about their positions, pay, and the pension plan and how it will affect the pension plan, if at all. Our greatest asset is the hardworking men and women at the board. We hope that any discussion or decisions about the future of Sewage and Water Board are made thoughtfully, and employees and employee retention is kept in mind. It was mentioned last week during the Senate committee hearing that an executive order may be forthcoming from the mayor to convene various stakeholders to chart a path forward for the utility. We hope to have a seat at the table to participate in those discussions, be it staff or board of director members. That's what I wanted to share with the group.
Randy, why would we not have a seat at the table?
Oh, I don't know. They may very well intend for us to have a seat. I'm just asking to be sure that it's echoed that we would like to be part of the discussion, be it staff or the board.
And have we seen an increase in inquiry for benefits, you know, because I'm glad that we had that statement, but, you know, I'm really nervous as a ratepayer citizen board member about retaining our staff, because we definitely don't want to, knowledge drain is such a critical point. So have we seen an increase in that?
It has risen to my level that there is a lot of discussion and concern and angst around what's happening now and uncertainty, which would naturally be a part of it, any change in process. So I am concerned that some may feel, if it's going to affect their pension, that was a big part of what brought people to us, was a strong government pension. If they feel there are going to be changes, they may very well decide to leave. And so that is a concern we have.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments? So I'll make a couple comments just to ground us here and why I asked our chief of staff to put this on the agenda and have asked to keep this as an item on the agenda moving forward. So I think as an organization, regardless of how we feel about these different pieces of legislation individually, we know and understand governance change is a transition point for any organization. And with that, we have the responsibility to maintain stability as much as possible. Part of that is anticipating what will change and what the impact may be, understand the risk, and then try to mitigate the risk. That's what we're trying to do across this table. And this committee is sort of leading because it's a governance adjustment. So I know there've been a couple of few questions around the table. We did engage with Adam Swansek from the mayor's office, with a line of questions asking about the implementation and the impact and so on and so forth. And I think we're going to make those questions available in short order so you can scan them and see what the city has said so far. I do think we need to do a deeper dive into what is going to change if and when this bill becomes effective. I think we've talked about it, but there still seems to be some ambiguity and uncertainty. So to the degree we can in-house look at the legislation as the current status. I know we talk about ordinances, but I think as Theron mentioned, there are some things that are going to immediately change as soon as it becomes effective. And then there's some questions specifically around emergency preparedness and response, chain of command, decision-making that become very relevant as we approach hurricane season. So I want us to make sure that we're absolutely clear of how the ground is going to shift if and when this item becomes, this piece of legislation, 1243, becomes effective. So I'd like to call for a motion on that. Here's my motion. The motion is request ongoing periodic updates to the Governance Committee regarding legislation, policy initiatives, and governance-related developments with potential operational or governance implications for this utility. That is simply to put this as a standing item on the agenda for Governance Committee moving forward.
Second.
You got it.
Moved. You moved.
I'm sorry, I thought you were.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Any public comment?
No public comment, Chair.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Okay, I have actually one more request or motion that is related. Let me pull it out here. This is a motion to request that legal counsel and executive leadership provide the Governance Committee with an assessment of the operational, governance, emergency management, and implementation implications associated with pending governance legislation, including any immediate changes, areas of ambiguity, operational continuity risk, and hurricane season preparedness considerations.
So moved.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Sure. Motion to request that legal counsel and our executive leadership staff provide the governance committee with any assessment, of the operational, governance, emergency management, and implementation implications associated with pending governance legislation, including any immediate changes upon effectiveness, areas of ambiguity, operational continuity risks, and hurricane season preparedness considerations. It's been moved. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Second, okay. Any discussion, questions?
No, that's clear. I got it.
Got it? Okay. All right, public comment?
We had a question.
Yes.
It's not a question, it's really more just like, I would encourage the staff as you're looking into this. I know recently, the city of Portland, Oregon just merged their water and wastewater units together. And they were already two separate departments under the same umbrella. And it was a pretty complex multi-year effort with a lot of planning and thought that went into it. And is sort of still, I think they're still sort of working out the kinks of what was created by that merging of entities. And so I think it would be a really good, very timely model for us to look at in terms of perhaps plotting out what it might look like for us if we wanted to do this in a way that was proper.
Responsible. Thank you, Director Antrim. Any other comments or questions? All right, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions around the legislative update or discussion item A? All right, thank you, Ms. Parker. We will now move on to our next discussion item, which is the executive KPI development and alignment discussion. Nope, I'm sorry, that's a mistake. The first one, a governance alignment and related processes. This is our retreat follow-up. Yes, that one. Okay. So as the committee knows, one of the primary goals of our recent board retreat was not simply to just facilitate discussion, but to identify some concrete governance modernization opportunities and operational improvements for the organization moving forward. During the retreat, the board expressed a desire to move several modernization, operational improvement initiatives forward. Those items span the work of multiple stakeholders across the organization, including board committees, executive leadership, legal, communications, and operational departments. A number of those action items either fall directly within the governance committee's purview or involve the governance committee as a participant and submitting and supporting coordination. In total, there were 9 governance-related actions discussed during the retreat process. And for purposes of implementation planning, those items have now been organized into broader governance committee work streams that we'll discuss today, and they're reflected in the slide. Today's discussion is intended to help the committee begin operationalizing those governance-related initiatives, identify areas requiring additional staff or legal support, and establish an initial framework for sequencing, prioritization, and oversight. I also think it's important to recognize that several of these governance initiatives have become increasingly timely in light of the current environment, including pending governance legislation, organizational transition considerations, and the approach of hurricane season. So from my perspective, this work is fundamentally about organizational continuity, governance maturity, and operational resilience. Committee's role is not simply to just identify governance ideas, but to help ensure that the organization's governance systems are sufficiently developed to support accountability, continuity, thoughtful decision-making, and operational stability over time. So at this time, I'd like to walk you through the proposed governance committee work streams reflected on the slide. Okay, so you see there are 3 main work streams: the governance framework modernization work stream, the board performance and development work stream, and the continuity and governance transition preparedness. Those bullets represent the action items that were discussed. Now, obviously, these were ideas and discussion points. These weren't identified as definite actions that the board aligned on during the committee. As such, this is just a summary and recitation of what we put on the table during the retreat. We can do whatever we want to with this material. I just wanted to make it easy for you see and digest. I'll walk through each one. The board and committee charter refresh, this came from questions about what our committee scopes are. I think there was also a couple questions about items that it's not particularly sure which committee they would fall under. For example, executive compensation has been handled by governance. I'm not entirely sure if governance on moving forward would be the committee. Usually there's an executive comp or compensation committee that's in play. So this is to take a look at our committee charters and refresh them to see if there's some adjustments or amendments or if new committees or ad hoc committees might be necessary. There was questions about attendance and participation policy that sets forth some expectations on attendance and participation from board members. I think there was also some questions about the existing board composition, including members of our city government and trying to understand their roles or guardrails on their roles and so on and so forth. And that goes into the conflict of interest and recusal guidance, not just for those seats, but also for others where we might have a discussion and an individual director may have a conflict of interest in the moment, what it looks like to raise your hand and say, I'm gonna recuse myself, or so on and so forth. And the related disclosures that we provide whenever we become directors and making sure those around the table have access to those disclosures. So that is just to help us get really tight on governance when it comes to those topics. And then the last one is committee board cadence and discussion only protocol. Director Antrim in particular, I remember raised some concerns about the committee meetings and the board meetings happening too close together. And so not really allowing time to fully digest information that then goes for action at the board level within 7 days. And so asking for maybe 2 weeks between the two. Also having an opportunity to have discussion-only meetings that are not requiring directors to make big decisions on the fly, but to allow us to have discussion and then time to marinate and maybe talk to our representative folks or community and then come back and make a decision later. So we would look into all of those things and try to come up with some plans that address those concerns. And then quickly for the second work stream, this board asked for retreat. We had the retreat in the spring. This board asked for a mid-year retreat instead of doing once a year, doing it biannually. And so we would look into making plans for that second retreat. Also, this group asked for, the board asked for board education topics that could be delivered without it being a formal convening, so electronically and the like. So we want to look into that. We want to review our pre-meeting briefings practice. We know Director Nelson or Steve Nelson in the GSO role would sometimes call and talk to us about different items, resolutions, to make sure we understand from an operational standpoint, and Caitlin has done the same. And so we want to maybe look at and maybe concretize and systematize the pre-board meeting briefing process. And then finally, we did an initial board self-assessment during the retreat. That seemed to be helpful for us to self-reflect. I think it is a staple practice in any high-performing board, and so we want to consider putting that in as an annual exercise and also maybe putting in a committee self-assessment process as well. And so then the last one, executive succession plans, which we have already begun, we would continue to refine and maybe institutionalize a process of review every year or 2 years of those plans. We talked about understanding our governance history. There was a request for that. I think Special Counsel's Office did provide a summary of all the governance changes of the Sewage and Water Board. I'm not sure if that has been distributed broadly, but we want to revisit that and see what our learnings are from that. And then finally, the item that you just voted on, which is governance transition preparedness assessment. That we just asked staff to move forward for the committee. That was not discussed at the retreat, but that is obviously very relevant, and thank you for your support on putting that on. So that is the 3 work streams. here's what I'm thinking about as far as next steps are concerned. The transition preparedness piece is the most immediate, and we are moving forward with that. The succession planning is obviously in progress and ongoing. We will hear from our executives today on succession plans. The next, I think, would be looking back at those work streams and working through a governance work plan on how we want to tackle those action items and whatever work or homework that comes from them. The communications deep dive is not necessarily under this committee. We don't have a communications committee. So this is where we have a little bit of ambiguity as to where that would sit. Perhaps it would be governance and strategy or the like, but there was a recurring theme throughout the entire retreat that we needed to fully understand our communications pain points and try to make some concerted efforts as a board on that. And so the follow-up might be to make plans to host that communications deep dive and then also our fall retreat planning. So I'll pause there and open the floor for any questions, comments, thoughts on that retreat recap.
I would like to say, number one, thank you for documenting the everything that we went through in a way that can allow us to put actions behind our words. And I know that one thing in particular, we talk about possible additional committees and executive compensation being under the governance committee. You know, I think we uncovered, you know, in previous iteration that that role was singular to executive director, and now being fully aware how that you know involves 3 executives.
Right.
To me, I think it does warrant having a committee dedicated to executive comp and not being an afterthought to, I shouldn't say an afterthought, but in addition to the lift of the governance committee. But I would be curious to hear what other, you know, what other board members think about that. There's no proposal or anything. I'm curious to hear what, you know, especially with your background, Greenwich, what do you think is in particular? But that's something that's been on my mind since then.
Yeah, so when it comes to compensation, yeah, that shouldn't be spread across several different, you know, groups just because of sensitivity of it, but also access to information. And I think that I know compensation strategy is one of those informational items that is about to kind of start bubbling up. And what I've found in some of the things that were provided to me by, you know, Dave and, I'm sorry, this Chief Administrative Officer, Dave, and HR, we had an excellent meeting about that, is that it touches so many things. And I think that having a dedicated compensation will also allow a seat at the table to go to each committee and say, hey, compensation is impacting you in this manner, you know, because it impacts operation, it impacts audit, it impacts governance. So I think that instead of having it amongst all of them, dedicated would definitely be the correct route. You know, and just in any business strategy, when you come to talking about how you pay people, that's the most important thing, right? You can't really get that wrong. You know, you don't have any wiggle room for that. You know, so yes, I 100% agree on having a dedicated committee to that.
Yeah, I think that's great. Another thing that comes to mind, I think Director Antrim made or at least brought to my attention, I can't remember the exact comment during the retreat, but it seems like it was worthy to have a more in-depth discussion on our timeline between committee meetings and full board meeting. And so it felt like, you know, we're identifying that compressed timeline between the two of 1 week is not ideal to, you know, fully participate and, you know, address some of the things that come up in committee meetings. And so I was hoping we could, you know, have that discussion as well amongst, you know, how people feel about that. If anyone, I'm just curious.
I'm open to it. I think another thing that was brought up is just getting the materials, and I know that that also is contingent upon many things, is, we have to get the materials to the people, we get the materials to us. So I don't know, like, necessarily the process behind that as far as how we can get that part to go quicker. But I think that, actually, I think it was Director Cole that brought it up, is that if we could get the materials a little bit earlier to digest, that's always helpful.
To that point, and just pulling it into the work streams, there are quite a few things that would require us to think through, be thoughtful about, and coordinate with staff. Obviously, we can't tackle all of those in our meetings here, right? Because we have limited time as directors, and oftentimes have very substantial agenda items that we have to get through. And so the point of organizing this in this way is to allow some of these things to go into discussions with staff to coordinate, and then perhaps to bring back a policy or a recommendation that this body or the larger board can react to, right? So, and to give individual directors a forum where they can express their concerns or ideas without it having to take up so much space in these meetings. The other thing is that governance footprint and the items that seem to be coming under the governance umbrella seems to be ever expanding, okay? And so I would love to push for some intentionality and review of what really should be under governance, and then what really should be under another committee, or where we need an ad hoc committee, just to help make sure we explore all the different options we have at our disposal in order to handle business as an organization. So that is my thought on how we get it done, okay? Any other questions, comments on any of these items? Anything you want to take off the list?
I do think that the communications, I think historically has fallen more into strategic planning committee.
Yep.
I think it could also fit in operations,
Yeah.
I think, rather than governance. So I do think that's something that, perhaps discussion between Director Davis and I can figure out which one of us wants to take that off your plate. if
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay. Great, so so that is not in our work streams, but it was on our.
I guess it was on the, yeah.
It was on our next
Yeah.
steps as a follow-up from the retreat that we need to action if we're going to do it. So, so sure, I consider that transition.
We can
Okay.
figure that out offline between now and the next.
Consider that delegated transition.
Transition preparedness, I'm sorry, Director Scruggs, transition preparedness, what is, I know it says immediate, but can we quantify that?
Yeah, so the motion, the very last motion that we voted on to have staff and executive.
come back to us. Got it.
That's it.
Got it.
That's it. And that's to make sure that we can understand before effectiveness what's going to happen. And then we can try to operationalize whatever mitigation steps that we need to do to decrease the negative impact. Okay. All right, so here is the related motion for this slide and this item. Motion to direct staff, legal counsel, and appropriate advisors to support the development and implementation planning related to the governance retreat action items, including the governance modernization, the board development initiatives, and the continuity planning. So those three work streams. And essentially, this motion is to ask the staff and legal counsel office to work together to develop a work plan to implement these three work streams. What I think that looks like is coming back with a plan and engaging with individual directors as appropriate, and then eventually coming back to this body and then to the board on some recommendations.
I like it. Yes.
Okay?
So you're,
Yeah,
all right.
just, that was the motion.
That was the motion. So I would like to move for that.
Okay. Gonna have a second.
Second.
All right. All right, any discussion? Do you want me to repeat the motion? Is everybody clear?
Good.
You good? All right. Any public comment?
No public comment, Chair.
All right. Hearing no public comment or discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All right, moving right along. Let's now move on to the next item on discussion, that is executive KPI development and alignment. Okay, that is, I guess I have the, nope, that's not it. I don't know how to take this down, so somebody will help me take that down and go to the default screen. Okay, so as part of the governance committee broader work around accountability and continuity, the committee has also been working with our executive leadership to develop more structured executive goal setting and KPI frameworks. One of the objectives underlying the work is to move to a more transparent, measurable, and governance-oriented executive evaluation process across all three executives that better aligns our organizational priorities, executive accountability, and board oversight responsibilities. So very importantly, the intention is not to create a punitive or static scorecard for our executives. Instead, it is to establish very clear alignment around our priorities, some measurable outcomes that indicate success and forward movement, operational leadership expectations and clarity there, and then some organizational objectives. We recognize that these frameworks, thank you, are evolving governance tools, and that refinement through committee discussion, executive collaboration, and board feedback is both expected and appropriate. So at this time, I'll ask the executives to walk the committee through the proposed goals and KPI frameworks for discussion and feedback by the committee. And I guess we can start with our executive director.
Okay. Good morning. I put together my goals and KPIs in line with the board's goals, our strategic plan, and those actions that I need to take as executive director to move the organization forward. And so my first one, aggressively pursue funding for maintenance, repair, and replacement of SWIBNO infrastructure. As we know, and I've talked about, that's the number one thing that we have to do. And so I will advance identification, pursuit, and coordination of at least 3 priority funding opportunities supporting infrastructure maintenance, repair, and replacement priorities, include active engagement with city, state, federal funding partners, and quarterly reporting regarding active pursuit submissions and funding advancement status. So the bottom line is trying to find funding and then keeping a record of what actions are we taking, where we are, and reporting that back. Also increase identification and pursuit of grant funding. Goal number 2, increase productivity. The KPIs being implement key projects and initiatives listed in the Water Distribution System Immediate Action Report, make progress on the implementation of key initiatives, including in the current 5-year strategic plan, create and develop a new 5-year strategic plan, identify, pursue, and establish funding sources for water, wastewater, and drainage needs, address internal vacancies, including filling open positions and eliminating unneeded positions. I think that's one thing that it's time for us to do, to look at where we are, all of the vacancies we have. Do we honestly look forward to filling them, or do we need to take them off the book? And so we'll be looking at that. Continue implementation of the IT programs that make us more secure and allow the organization to work more efficiently. Implement key projects and initiatives included in the water quality master plan, and continue progress of the sewage transmission main repair project at the industrial canal. So those are some of the main issues that I will be held responsible to lead them and then be able to quantify where we are. The next one, develop action plans that aid the utility. I often tell people running a utility is a lot like a large boat, okay, in that you can't turn it in just a matter of minutes or days, that the key to our success is planning. This board has had a history of doing that successfully. You did it with the power plant. and we have other issues that we're going to have to face. So I want to develop and amend proposed fee structures that cover the stormwater needs that we're in the process of doing, develop and amend plans to address aging infrastructure, and develop and amend overall ongoing 5-year strategic plan for the utility. We also have to do more in the area of outreach. We're looking to make a lot of changes. We're looking to tell people that we're a new water department, sewage and water board. And so a big part of that is going to be having outreach to the community. So we want to increase our participation at community meetings, develop recurring cycle of informative social media posts and updates, and increase participation and availability for media interviews. As you know, I've taken a lot of that and have gone forward with that along with Sierra's help. And I think it has been good for the organization, but we need to do more of it. We need to make it part of our DNA that we're out in the community. We're asking to make big changes and we're taking on big problems. And in doing that, the public deserves to be kept up to date. And one thing that I always stress is that the public, if they have a question, they always deserve an honest and thought out answer. And so we have to make ourselves present to present that. The fifth goal, increase outreach to staff. So we'll hold quarterly town hall meetings with the employees of SWIPNO at the various facilities, hold virtual quarter meetings with mid-level managers and supervisors, share annual state of the utility information with the employees, walk the utility work areas and meet staff where they work. Really, that is so important, I have to admit. The times I am out at the plants and people see me, I'm met with a lot of warmth, a lot of encouragement, and also a lot of their pride in working for us. And I think when it comes to an executive director taking the time to be there and to shake their hand, it means something to them. And you know, and I say it often, I'll say it until the end of time. We are water professionals. And I don't care if they have a GED or a PhD. We're all part of that chain. And so I have to encourage that, and I can do that by being, at the plants. We have to regularly keep staff well informed regarding issues that affect them, and then speak at the orientation meetings we have here at the headquarters to encourage people when they first walk into the door. Goal number 6, develop and maintain a national presence in the water arena. Continue membership on the board of directors for National Association of Clean Water Agencies that I'm on. Continue membership with the Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies, AMWA. And then also pursue opportunities to testify before United States House of Representatives and Senate on relative water issues. I know that these organizations are considering me for those opportunities. I'll say humbly, I'm naturally at the right point at the right time. It takes years. I've been doing this for over 20 years. And so at this point, I've been part of these agencies. So now when they shut the door and there's a conversation about pushing water issues forward in America, I'm at the table within 2 major utilities. So we have a voice. And so I want to push that again. I've said before, we're going for monies for the organization, that we try to develop the monies, and that at the same time, be first in line when they start to distribute it, because we've been there, we've been pushing it and trying to achieve that. So those are my goals. I believe they're in line with what the organization needs to do, and I will put them in a PowerPoint for the board meeting.
Great.
Thank you, Director Heyman. So just for the committee's benefit, and I mentioned this as some guidance prior to the committee, we understand that you received these documents yesterday, have a chance to process them and ask questions today. I would like you also to have opportunity to provide additional feedback after today directly to the executive if you have questions that come up. My feedback has been, and I've provided it to Director Heyman, but I'll provide it here. I have specific comments for each of the KPIs, but the global guidance, and I think will be applicable to all the KPI presentations, is that KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator, and so typically we want them to be measurable, right? We do want them to align with a goal, but we want our goals to really push us forward. So to the degree that we have a KPI that is a standard part, it's just an action that you do as a part of the job, we want to transform that into some measurement of progress. So for example, on the first KPI, we talked about aggressively pursuing funding for maintenance, repair, and replacement. That KPI says advance at least 3 priority infrastructure funding initiatives, and then it says including quarterly reporting to the board regarding those pursuits. So there is a number and a measurement that's associated. So that's my feedback, is that we revise these KPIs to make sure that they are smart. Yes, thank you, Director Greenwich. That said, I do think the direction is appropriate and aligned with the strategic plan. I think the goals hit on the most important, items and focus points that we've had as an organization and definitely as a committee. And so that's my comments for this report. Go ahead.
I agree with you 100%. I know a lot of this is subjective, but if we can get something that's a tick box, and I hate tick boxes, but that's just the world we live in, I guess, now. Like you said, just drill down a little more. If it's 3, if it's 5, just something that's
Objective.
fair and achievable, that's objective and not subjective.
Exactly.
But the content, to me, is great. I think it's just aligned with our priorities.
I can do that.
Triple echo, because that's actually kind of the note I made when you were discussing productivity, is where's the measurement in that? And I guess the overall document, I was wondering, and I don't have the document, so it might be more specific than what I heard you summarize. So is this within the next year? I know some things you outlined within 5 years, so just trying to see just trying to see which goals align with a 5-year, quantification on achievement, and what you're going to be doing like within the next year. And I know we have the quarter.
Within the next year.
Within the next
But
year,
it
okay.
might be part of the 5-year plan.
Got it, okay,
So
yeah,
everything is going to be within the next year.
perfect, yeah.
If I get one more comment. I say that to kind of, and engineers are notorious for trying to make, a formula out of something that you can't make a formula out of. Let's not put ourselves too much in a corner with the measurements. I mean, I do think a lot of this does warrant some subjective assessment. So I don't know how we do that, but
Okay.
just a thought. I don't want it to be a score sheet where you score a 10 and
Right.
X equals,
Right. So to that
maintain
point,
some latitude.
to that point, I think it's probably important context for me to provide that these goals and KPIs connect into the evaluation, right? So we would expect these to be refreshed and updated annually. We're getting them now kind of later in the year than we typically would because we had some other things and this is a new process. But the goal that we all aligned on a couple meetings ago was a certain quarter, executives would present these goals and KPIs. We do a mid-year check-in that looks like the fall, I think September-ish, October-ish, and then we would come around in the spring and do the final assessment. And the hope is that having KPIs makes it easier for us as a board to say, did we move in this direction or not? Remember, we aligned when we did the executive performance review framework on a exceeds, meets, and doesn't meet. And so these would tie into helping us go through each of those points. All right. Okay.
One other comment on outreach, and I've seen an increase in that, and I really appreciate that. It's just, it seems like the standalone opportunities might be a little bit difficult for participation, and just, as you're saying, meeting the employees where they're at, meeting the community where they are. Not just hosting just something SWIBNO related for them to attend, but attending a function that they are.
That they are, okay.
Yes, that's just the only other thing I would add.
Yes.
Yeah, I did attend the, one of the Water Speaks events over at Dryaz, and the presentation was great. It was a light turnout, but like I told Randy and Sierra, if it's one person, or if it's 100 people, let's keep doing it.
That's
Yeah.
right,
You know,
that's right.
I think attendance will track upwards if people learn that
Yeah.
we're available to talk to. Because it was a great opportunity for the public to engage with you personally, if they wanted to.
I try my best to bring the same energy, and staff does too. I know Caitlin's done a great job too, speaking at other events.
Yeah. You know, my hope is that when we do the communications deep dive, we can tackle that project, right? And look and see how could that have been more effective? What are there other opportunities to get in front of people that is not just Swebno, like you said? So yeah, I'm hopeful that we can pull all the ideas and also bring other stakeholders to the table other than the board when we have that deep dive.
Yep.
Any other thoughts, comments for today? Of course, you can still continue to bring those forward. Let's now move on to General Superintendent,
Sure.
interim General Superintendent.
Exactly. All right, so very similar to Randy, looking at the priorities for 2026, given all of the work we have going on. The general superintendent framework is the majority of staff in the organization, about a $200 O&M budget, as well as a very large capital program. And we have about 14 different individual departments. So I don't mean in any way to say that these are the only things we're doing in any given year, but these are the priorities that have risen to the top, over the last several months. So first, I think I have a little bit of overlap with the executive director on improving system reliability by planning for the next large programs to continue with strategic and effective infrastructure investment. So advancing the next phase of the Water Quality Master Plan implementation by completing the procurement and contract award for the Phase 1 design, of course, maintaining alignment with procurement policies, requirements, and available funding. And then secondly, completing the items for the Water Transmission Mains Immediate Action Plan that we've identified for this first year by the end of this year, contingent upon approved and available funding parameters, which we're already working towards. So that would align with vision, mission, and strategy of the organization. The second goal is around organizational leadership, by the goal to ensure continuity of operations due to changes in technology and anticipated staff retirements by filling key positions. The Sewage and Water Board is not alone in, staff retirements pending and, workforce challenges. We're not alone in that in the water utility space. We have two specific KPIs here. One is around the technology piece, which would be to fill a new asset management leadership position, which would help to establish an enterprise asset management governance and standards specifically for our operations department. And we would do that in conjunction with the CIO and the IT department. So taking advantage of a new software technology tool we'll be implementing, we need to make sure we are set up for success to implement that internally and take advantage of that. And then second, to fill critical both engineering and operations vacancies for workforce continuity planning, for operational functions, and staff retirements. The third goal is around utility management, and that is, of course, to implement best practices for water utility management, regulatory compliance, and public health. The first goal to maintain or improve our state-issued water quality grades for the Carrollton Water Treatment Plant and Algiers Water Plant for the operational and treatment performance-related categories. We had really good news last week around improved grades, and we want to keep that momentum going. And then secondly, to decrease sanitary sewer overflows by taking a deep dive in that, completing a trend analysis, and initiating targeted measures related to operations, infrastructure repairs, and public education. Goal 4 is related to fiscal management, strengthening internal controls regarding overtime usage to ensure policy compliance, improve operational efficiency, and monitor cost. Of course, this is all done in conjunction with the CAO. So the first thing being something that's already in progress, to deploy biometric time clocks within departments who do not already have them, to ensure improved accuracy of timekeeping and compliance with our internal policy. And going from there, evaluating the overtime trends and initiating an action plan around that to sort of systematically begin to reduce the average overtime hours in non-emergency conditions, I want to make that clear, while maintaining also our expected level of service and regulatory requirements. I don't think there's any one solution to any given thing. That's why I think it's really important to look at each individual department on a case-by-case basis and see what actions around there. This is not just a cost, or efficiency. There's also safety that we want to take in mind. And finally, from a customer service and public trust standpoint, strengthening our internal and external coordination to improve that customer trust. Want to improve upon an existing infrastructure escalation management process we already do have in place, improve upon that, build upon it in conjunction with customer service and communications. So we have clear lines and roles of responsibility in there. And with that, responding to 85% of our escalated infrastructure issues within 48 hours, not necessarily resolving them, but responding to inquiries with documented next steps and the anticipated resolution timeframes. And this really dovetails into then increasing our transparency and improving knowledge with our council members, staff, and other external partners by establishing structured and documented information exchanges with those partners to ensure stakeholders have routine, meaningful updates on the utility's priorities, challenges, performance, and decision-making processes.
Thank you. On that last one, such an important area is customer trust, right? It'd be helpful as you focus the goal on internal and external coordination. It'd be helpful to evidence why that's an area to focus on.
Okay.
And I mean, you don't have to do it in your goal, but in your delivery and discussion of it, I think it's worthwhile to say, we've looked into this issue and we understand for these reasons why this is what we should be focusing our attention on as opposed to something else, right?
Right.
Versus like staffing or something like of the customer service department or something to that degree. Comments, thoughts, feedback?
I love number 5, I do. And I think it coordinates with, meeting people where they're at, so I absolutely love number 5. Number 3, Dwyer Canal issue, would that fall kind of underneath that?
Absolutely,
That's what I was
absolutely.
thinking, like when I
Yes,
saw that, I was
absolutely,
like, okay. Want to just note that. And then number 4, with regards to reduction in overtime, because that's a very sensitive subject and I 100% understand why. But I think that goes back to the compensation piece and that we're ensuring that we're paying our associates in a manner in which they can live, that they won't have to be so reliant on that overtime. So I think that we need to speak to that point when we're talking about the reduction in overtime, is how do we leverage making sure they're compensated accurately, which also ensures that you may not have to fill so many FTEs if you're bringing that up, right? So if you have these multiple FTE positions that are budgeted, right? So I'm looking at Gray like, FTEs are budgeted, right? So it's sitting there, and to your point, Randy, like, do we need or do we not, right? And I think that, maybe department by department, because I know Stephen would say something about 1,600 work orders. Clearly, that's a department that needs more. But I just want to make sure as we're reducing that overtime, that we're considering the compensation of the associates. And, I know we keep talking about that. That's why we need a compensation committee. So that was it. So my only comments on it.
No, thank you. If I could just comment on that again, the point is to continue to maintain our expected level of service, right?
Right.
That's not something we would want to compromise as a
Right.
result of any of those
Absolutely.
actions, but it is something that's important.
Feedback? None? Okay, thank you, Caitlin. And now we'll move on to special counsel. Darryl, take it away.
I've identified 5 strategic goal priorities for the Office of Special Counsel. Given our current climate, and I think everybody here recognizes that climate, and as a result of that, we are receiving numerous public records requests. And that is my number one priority and goal is to improve the public records response, efficiency, compliance, and workflow management while reducing the organizational risk and backlog within a 12-month period. We would try to have a average public records request life cycle is around 10%. We try to maybe shrink that a little bit. Under the current state of the law, you have a 3-day turnaround on it, but certainly you can request an extension of that. And what the Office of Special Counsel should be mindful of when requesting or not being able to comply with the 3-day request, to be forthright with the requester suggesting that we need more time. Another priority would be to work with the departments and have them designate a person to respond to those public records requests. As we receive them through next request, we would then send it over to the department, and the department could have one person who is designated to respond to that. In that line, we would also ask that that department, or it should be a fallback person, because recently we had a situation wherein nobody could respond to the request because that particular person was out. So that would be a priority on our list of things, and that would go along with maybe some internal training between the Office of Special Counsel as well as the department. The other priority would be the reduction of outside counsel cost. That could be somewhat complicated because it would require staffing up for us. And to be candid, we have difficulty getting people to come into the agency, particularly under the current climate in terms of what's going on in Baton Rouge. There's some external components that go along with that I don't necessarily need to get into. I just typically, we do some outreach with the local universities, the law schools, and try to get some people in on the ground to come in and get introduced to the Sewage and Water Board, kind of understand how the Sewage and Water Board works. But to reducing the cost of outside counsel, we would focus on stricter billing guidelines, maybe setting some caps on litigation cost, maybe in-house doing some more of the lifting that outside counsel will do. For example, with discovery requests, if we assign a case to a particular law firm, what they typically will do is ask us for information. We provide the information, they review the information, and we have this back and forth flow of this just discovery information, back and flow of documents. Whereas what we should entertain is have in-house respond to the discovery and send them more of a finished product, and say, because what they end up doing is when they finish the final product, it has to be reviewed and approved by the Office of Special Counsel anyway. So maybe we can cut that situation out. We could provide and respond to the discovery and give them a finished product. That could reduce their time. And the last thing along those lines would be a quarterly routine audit of their billing to make sure that we're getting our value in terms of dollars for the work that's being done. And that should be done, maybe in a quarterly. The other one would be, my other priority would be contract management and oversight. I want to give kudos out to the department that handles the contracts for us. I have a good team that does that. They have developed a form that goes to every department, and when the department wants a contract, they have to fill out a contract request form. The priority in that would be the same problem we're having with the public records request is sometimes we get people who are out when the information is being requested or provided, and there's somewhat of a delay there.
Yeah.
But that's not always. I mean, most of the departments are pretty good completing the request form, monitoring the request, making sure that we're on our end as well as we're making sure that they're on end. And I would have to give them kudos because they're pretty good at that. But we would also have a situation too that we would like to see maybe some additional training from the special counsel's office to those departments so we can refine that. Another thing I would like to do in that vein is a survey with each department to see how the Office of Special Counsel is responding to them. I think that could be helpful in being more efficient in terms of the contract management. The other priority would be the intellectual property, this trademark thing that we have. Recently, we had someone in my office discovered that I don't know if it's a store, a company, or some called the White Elephant. I think it was called the White Elephant off the North Shore. It was actually selling the lids. And when confronted, he made the remark that he had acquired the lids legally. I don't know how you do that, because I mean, it's ours. So we are investigating that. But to that point, we are trying to put into some goals that we have maybe certainly reestablish our trademark, make sure that that on the legal end is tight and tight so that nobody can kind of scoop that up. Aggressively pursue unauthorized use of our logo. Send a message to the community that that's not acceptable.
Okay.
And try maybe to reach out to those people who, once we've identified them as unauthorized users, maybe work with them and bring them into the fold. Have them kind of come in and make some agreements. Recently, we did have an agreement with Adler Jewelers. Well, we all know Adler's out of business now. So now we got to maybe look around and find somebody else who would be interested in partnering with the Sewage and Water Board regarding that.
And that partnership was a licensing agreement, or what was the?
They had an arrangement with us that we would receive, whatever the fee arrangement was for using our logo.
Investment in the
Sure.
utility, yeah, for using the utilities brand.
I know I know they had a really, really nice set of cufflinks over at Adler's.
I don't know.
You bought it.
Okay.
And the last thing on my list would be prioritizing the legal operations and case management. We have investigated time and time again, and I know that we have some budget restrictions on a case management system. And I have Sarah in my office who periodically is on a watch for that. One of the things that we do, and one of the things that I would like to do is have maybe a more robust audit process within the Office of Special Counsel in terms of our case turnaround. I think that would be important in getting, from the beginning to the end. And for the non-lawyers, it typically takes a case of maybe 3 to 4 years to come from beginning to end, the life span. And we could, there are external factors that dictate when you can restrict that or shorten that. But some of the things that I believe that can take place in the office is more templates with regards to pleadings and strategies, along with being more aggressive with plaintiffs or persons who are not working their case. There's an old adage that says, if you're a defendant, it benefits you that a plaintiff does not prosecute their case, because there's certain rules and regulations that allow you to have that case dismissed if they fail to prosecute. But what we find typically is that they will do something small right before that prescriptive period runs out to extend the life of the case. Our department would develop a more robust approach in terms of auditing those cases to keep the plaintiff's foot to the fire so we can have these cases closed out and off the books. And that's it for me.
Thank you. I think these are, well, defer to the committee first for any comments, feedback, questions.
Yes, so I love all three of those. I think I like that you did identify a possible partnership with maybe universities to get some type of support, and gaps and things like that. I think the same thing with you, Director Heyman, when it came to that identification of grant funding piece, which is a large chunk of what, a actual department usually would do. And it's just like, I know you all are kind of running on a shoestring budget, trying to pull it together, but, possibly if there is an opportunity for some type of university support or internships, because that grant funding piece project management, case management. I know those are software. I don't know if there's something that will work across the board that may help when it comes to that, because you all are kind of talking about some of the similar things that a nice, robust case and project management software may be able to help on both sides. But I love these. I did want to ask, are these internal KPIs, or is this something that actually will be published to the community? Because a lot of times we get feedback that they don't know what we're doing. And so we're actively doing things. So is this internal or is this external as well, since we are in a public board meeting,
Yeah, so
committee meeting?
my view is this, it's all external because it's all, right, and this is the reason why we're having the discussion, and it's appropriate for public discussion, right? So it's all out there. I do think what you're probably pointing to is some intentionality on KPIs that are truly very responsive to what our customers and the public have been asking or expressing concern about, to let them know that we have built into our executive evaluation metrics that are directly responsive to their concern. So I would hope our comms folks would take a look at this and see the opportunity to put some of those things forward, but it's all public.
And then lastly, for the KPI framework, I don't know if this makes it too much. I see opportunities for departmental collaboration to where you can actually identify a department that needs to have, continuous support. I think that's important, so that way, departmental-wise, it may be helpful for us framing goals, and getting things done, just so that we're identifying, so it's not, oh, Director Heyman, this is all on you. There are some cross-collaboration that needs to happen for these KPIs, so.
So actually, that's a good point, in that special counsel's presentation reflects goals for the department, which is appropriate. He is the leader of the department. It will be used to evaluate his performance. And so when we go into KPIs, there probably should be a look back to say, is this a KPI that allows the board to measure my performance against these goals, right? So that's the KPI construction. That's the comment that I would say for all the KPI presentations. But I think Director Heyman, as the chief executive, then presents the goals that are most reflective of the entire enterprise. And then that pull in all the other goal points from the rest of the executive team, not word for word, but that reflect the overarching goals for the organization. So to your point, the unified cross-functional goal set, I think, is the one that comes from Director Heyman, and then he has the KPIs that reflect his contribution to the forward movement of those goals. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
My only comment was, and this affects special counsel and I think GSO KPIs around spending. And also executive director, talk about overtime analysis, overtime spend, and outside counsel spend. I don't want us to hold you accountable for a scenario where that spend may be appropriate. So what the language that I thought was missing is, this is informed by an assessment, right? The spend may be appropriate, right? I don't want it to be, there was no reduction in overtime, no reduction in outside counsel spend, and therefore we see that as a negative. If it's appropriate, I think we need the opportunity to evaluate you appropriately on that.
Yeah.
Because like Director Cole said, ultimately we're trying to check a few boxes, right? And I don't want it to be misinformed.
Yeah. That's a good point. And my thought would be, what you've identified as the ways to bring spend down are processes and behaviors that you would still be able to execute even in the context of a higher spend need. So so to some degree, what that means is you develop your process, you implement your process, and it results in a decrease in spending that is material, then you've done it, right?
Or
Even
it
if
justifies,
or-
right?
Right. Even if it means that year there was an increase in spending because of some other requirement, your process that you suggested you would implement actually reduced spend, even if it's not a global reduction in spend year over year. So I think that's what, yeah.
I think
that
y'all are
makes
saying the
sense.
same thing.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so,
I think Director Cole has.
yes, sir.
One thing I didn't add that I think I want to add is develop a pipeline for employment. And I should have had that on there because I'm actually doing work on that. So I'll add that to it.
That would be great.
Fantastic. So two things that I think we should add for special counsel. One is AI review, and maybe technology, maybe for you too, Director Heyman, is how are we leveraging technology? So some goal that pushes us forward in that regard. I think that's probably for both
Okay, so
to consider.
add that to it.
Yeah, I think it's
I would
a,
argue it's all three.
yeah, okay. Yeah.
AI is in engineering and not going away.
Yeah, and so what I'm thinking about is, I agree. What I'm thinking about is from council's perspective, it is use policy and guardrails to protect the organization around AI use, because I know that's a concern, right? I think for Director Heyman, it is a plan for technology modernization, technology leverage and use for the whole enterprise, to be informed by our friend out there, Mr. Isles. Mr. Isles. And then for Caitlin, it is to review and understand and then maybe implement further technology uses in the operations of the organization. Something like, that's not the goal language, but something in that regard. Yeah. Also, there was a mention of staffing issues where there was a critical process that was mono-sourced, meaning there's one person that does that critical process. So what I would say across the board is to build in redundancy for critical processes, right? In every department across the board. So if anybody drops dead, walks out the door, the train keeps moving. That's akin to our succession planning from a high level, but it probably should be a goal. If that is a pain point in your function, it probably should be a goal. Yes, sir. No.
I've just got one, and
Yeah.
it's, you touched on it a little bit just now. It's a question for Daryl. I understand the absolute just burden that a public records request can put on just me, the very few that I wind up having to deal with. It can take days to try to produce whatever emails or they're looking for. Is there a way to use technology, like a document management system or something like that, to ease that burden, or even AI?
That is certainly something that has been suggested here with the AI component. It's something that we certainly can look at. I mean, the way the process works now, it's the next request that kind of comes in, and it kind of, the requester can see the progress in terms of the document. But certainly that would be, something that we certainly could look at in terms of having AI maybe assist with that.
There's got to be some.
I mean, the
way.
only concern with that is that, the review the documents the question is when you review the documents, because some of the information is protected and has to be redacted. So that would be I guess would be the tricky part for us. Just having it just kind of bundled out like that could be problematic.
Right.
I do feel like that may be a full discussion, an AI discussion. And the reason why I say that is because of that's what the red flag that I thought of, kind of those redacted information being uploaded into, a cloud-based server where access is not limited to the user, especially with the different types of AI companies and how they're using it. So that may be a discussion at some point in time that you may have to have and have several presentations to look at it because AI is changing and access points. Because you have private privileged information and the moment you upload it into it, that's it. It's that one time, so.
Yeah, my initial reaction was like, just upload everything and let them sort through it, but obviously you can't do that. But maybe you can kind of do that. I don't know.
There's a way you have to even redact information because it just like, if you put a black mark over it, they can take the black mark off and it's still there,
Right.
so.
That's right. All right, any other questions, comments around these goals and KPIs? Immense gratitude to our executives for taking the time to do this. I know
Yes.
there's a lot going on, but it is stabilizing for us to still be able to reflect, integrate our plans, visualize where we want to be, and then move into our SMART goals, right? As an organization, I think that's like the beacon light that just keeps us focused and moving forward for our ratepayers and for the utilities' well-being. So big thanks and congrats for getting this part of the process done. To the committee, continue to reflect and give feedback. I don't know how you feel about how we want to handle this. Obviously, none of this would be adopted at our level. It would be adopted at the board level. The committee can make a recommendation to move this forward. We're a little bit behind on schedule as far as the review schedule is concerned. And so I consider that, but I think what we can do today is we can either say, go back, work on them, and come back to the next committee meeting next month, and then we'll revisit. Or if you think they're strong enough and there's just a need for some refinement, then we can move to recommend adoption with consideration of whatever additional committee feedback comes between now and then.
I'd move we go ahead and adopt it with, minor tweaks that we discussed in this
Form.
proceeding, yeah.
Okay. So that's a motion.
Oh, so that's a move?
That's a move.
Second for
You
me.
second, okay. That motion's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I'll just offer, let's get your feedback in 48 hours, please, and not reply all. Send it directly. You can send it to me if you want me to integrate it, or send it directly to the executives. And then once that closes, then I'll work with the executives to finalize and then send it on off to board relations. Comments, concerns, questions? All right, public comment.
No public comment, Chair.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All right, moving right along to executive succession planning. So the board, at the committee's recommendation, requested a succession plan from our executive staff, in particular from our executive director. And that was supposed to cover the executives who report to the board and any other critical staff that that the executives thought it made sense to pull into that plan. And so that motion included, or that resolution included, consultation with the committee in the process. So this meeting represents another step toward that consultation requirement. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Executive Director Heyman to walk through his succession plan. However, one more caveat. Our interim general superintendent also created a succession plan for the operational part of the organization, perhaps because she thought that's what the board was requesting. But nevertheless, it's done. So I think it would be good for this body to see it and review it and have an opportunity to ask questions and give feedback and the like. So following Executive Director Heyman's succession plan for the enterprise, then we'll hear from our interim GSO on the succession plan for her part of the organization. All right.
Okay, thank you. So with the succession plan, we looked at of course, the triggering events. If there's a sudden resignation, death, incapacity, or removal, none of them do I personally like. But, but then there'll be the immediate actions. The board chair could convene an emergency meeting, interim authority designated according to pre-approved order of succession, and that's the purpose of the document. And then designation of financial, operational, and legal authority confirmed in writing. Authority clarification. And a lot of this we've had in the past, but some of it hasn't been written down. And the organization has worked well during transitions, but this is a chance for us to tie it down. So then we look at authority clarification. For contracts, NTE is not to exceed $1 million. The general superintendent, in my absence, would have the ability to execute those. Also, the chief financial officer. Those items involving government affairs and board of directors matters, the chief of staff would be able to handle, would sign off on those. Legal and federal, state, local regulatory matters, our special counsel would be able to sign those in his purview, under his purview. The pay, benefits, disciplinary, and civil service matters, the chief administrative officer. The communications protocol, internal staff communications, that would be under communications director. Regulatory notifications, general superintendent. Public communications, if applicable, again, under the communications director. Plan succession protocol. Executives are expected to provide reasonable notice of departure where possible. We have a transition planning, knowledge transfer expectations. One, to prepare transition document outlining major issues and timelines. And then hold meetings with subordinates to transfer information on projects, hold meetings with the board and committees to transfer information. The overlap period, if feasible, the goal is to have 60 days to have overlap. Documentation of active matters, again, document major existing projects and goals. Identification of operational risks, meet with department heads and create list of current operational risk and prioritize said list. Number 4, when we look at regulatory and infrastructure continuity, because SWMNOR operates critical infrastructure, the plan must ensure continuous compliance with state and federal environmental regulations. The general superintendent and special counsel would keep that afloat. The bond covenant compliance, that would be the chief financial officer. Items dealing with the emergency infrastructure response capability would be the general superintendent. Continuity of disaster response authority would be under the general superintendent, chief administrative officer. And then the succession positions under number 5, should an interim executive director be needed due to executive director's absence, the order of succession is as follows. David Callahan, chief administrative officer, and Caitlin Timmerick, the general superintendent. And I would say, I think both of them are very qualified to step into that position. I only pick David in that if we have a situation where there is a Katrina or something, that the general superintendent is able to focus on the major issue while the engineering side of it, while the chief administrative officer would be able to do the day in, day out running of the organization. Okay, that's all I have.
Okay. So comments, questions, and then let me also mention, our special counsel also prepared a succession plan for his department. I did not know that. So then after our interim GSO, then we'll hear from special counsel on the succession plan as well. But back to Director Hayman's plan. Any comments, questions, thoughts there? You don't have any? Okay, so I have quite a few. And I think it is directionally good, but thin. I think there's a number of unanswered questions, like when we mentioned change in authority, when we mentioned the interim folks that step in, I think we need to be more clear on what authority is actually transferring, what requires board input or action to transfer, or whether it's automatic, whether it's temporary, and then when it expires. So it should be a little bit more of a playbook that if something was to happen, someone could pick it up and say, okay, this is what we do. So I think that's my global feedback, is that we just need to build it out a little bit more so it's easy to follow. I think communication authority should maybe be spelled out, especially in crisis or emergency events. That is a part that should be reflected from my view. And then other related emergency governance continuity issues or circumstances should be thought out and put in there as well. And then I think it makes sense for us to have a review and maintenance cadence as well. So how often are we going to review this plan? Is it going to be every year, every couple of years, every time there's a major organizational change? Then we review it. So how often are we going to review it? And who would review it? So that's my feedback. I'll provide more to you directly, Director Heyman.
Okay. The comments you have, are they in an email? The ones you just made? I caught
Somewhat,
some of
yes.
them.
I think I provided them, and then I have some more specific recommendations so that we're aligned on kind of what's in my head, and you could do with it what you will. Any other feedback on that?
I have a question now, Chair.
Yep.
So when I digest this, I'm looking at governing documents, governing processes until the emergency board meeting takes place.
Perhaps.
Okay.
That's what I don't know, right? And I think that's what,
Because when I look at all the triggering events, I'm like, oh, we call a meeting.
Right.
But we still have to service the community in the.
in the interim, exactly.
This is that stopgap.
Yes, that's what I
wanted to be
think,
clear.
but that's what I think needs to be clear in the
Gotcha.
document.
Okay,
Right,
okay.
right.
All
And my best idea of it is to look at it as a playbook that anyone could pick up and read and say, okay, this is what happens first, then this happens next, then this happens next. Then it doesn't matter who's reading it. We've already determined what's gonna happen. Okay, so let's move on to our interim general superintendent succession plan.
Sure. So as I've already mentioned, part of the structure within the general superintendent's office involves 3 deputy general superintendents. I think you all have interacted with them at various points, and that structure lends itself fairly well to this sort of, emergency and natural succession or planned succession. So there's a lot of that already built into that structure on purpose due to, criticality of the role. So in terms of defining, the express authority for this role, there are a number of internal policies, and our contract specifications do specifically identify roles for the general superintendent and, of course, others in the organization. There's a certain amount of regulatory authority with respect to operational related matters and signatures, which is shared also with the executive director. And then in the event of, an emergency response or emergency operations center activation, the general superintendent functions as the incident commander through that system. That's the high level of the, in addition to the day-to-day, those are the defined responsibilities in policy and other internal matters. I frame mine kind of in the opposite direction for a planned departure, and I'm glad to hear your feedback, and this is a playbook. I wasn't sure if I was overstepping a little bit in terms of, making some policy recommendations here, but, outlining what we've seen recently, that my suggestion would be that the general superintendent would provide a written recommendation to the executive director and the board for one of the deputy general superintendents to move into an interim role as expediently as possible. That would be primarily based on the operational and organizational risks present at the time, as well as past performance and demonstrated leadership. Longevity is important, but may or may not be the only, would not be the only factor in that evaluation. And then my thought was that in consultation with the executive director, that was where the board would then make that interim appointment. So that's, again, these are my thoughts for y'all's consideration.
Can you pause there? Let me make sure I understand. So
Yeah.
you're pointing to an immediate succession or an immediate interim that then plays a role until the board can meet
Yes,
and appoint
correct.
another interim, unless they are okay with the interim that is, okay. Is that clear?
Yeah, but I have a challenge with it since we're paused. So if we kind of highlight the triggers laid out in executive director's plan, unfortunately with some of those triggers, theoretically, GSO wouldn't have the opportunity because they would no longer be here. And so I think tying it to a position, if you, I don't know how you identify or stratify the 3 deputies, but I think well beforehand, we need to know which one, whether you tie it to longevity, tied to
okay.
which position.
Right.
I think we need a predetermined.
Right.
That's fair. I was speaking to the planned.
Yeah.
So I was doing mine in opposite of the way I think you laid it out. But yes, in terms of emergency, absolutely, feedback will take it on that.
Cool.
Yeah. So yes, certainly can clarify if that's the intent of this document is to be that playbook. Can clarify that, that would be up to then the board action, right? There's only so much action that the person existing in that role would take in terms of a recommendation, and then the executive director and board, as I understand it, would move forward in their own determination.
Yep.
To facilitate that kind of work and sort of transition planning, there's already a lot of knowledge transfer that's already occurring on a regular basis. A lot of that is built into the process already and the structure. But of course, in the event of a planned departure, there would be meetings with deputies, general superintendents, executive director, other critical, executive functions to make sure that any critical, high-profile, complex items were thoroughly transferred. So there would need to be that. And then speaking to the emergency succession or an unforeseen, we'll call it departure event, the deputies can immediately assume internal policy execution within their line, within their chain of command. This may, depending on the policy, require approval from the executive director and others. This is where CFO, CAO, special counsel, others may need to weigh in on what written authority would need to exist there. But I think that is not a difficult thing for those roles to immediately assume those responsibilities for internal policy. If necessary, a limited approval for contract matters could be prepared, as was earlier this year. And then my suggestion is based on the staffing arrangements and circumstances, the executive director would recommend an interim general superintendent. However, your point is taken about providing some additional guidance and direction there. So noted. But for regulatory and legal matters, the executive director would need to assume that responsibility until a delegated authority could be determined on a case-by-case basis.
So I have a question. So for this document, the first thing is, where does it live? Is this going to be something that's going to be posted for all employees, or how does that kind of work? And then the other thing is, when it comes to civil service, because I'm still kind of vague on how they move. If you move someone up in the ranks under them, what happens? So will they get a copy of this, or how does that kind of work?
Yeah, so I can't speak to the civil service piece. As far as the succession plan is concerned, it would live with our other critical key documents for the organization. So I would imagine legal have a copy, board relations have a copy, and so on and so forth. It'd be in our in that consolidation that we received when we first came up to the board. But it may make sense for it to be socialized with leadership in each of the key functions of the organization, so they're familiar with it and don't see it for the first time when a situation happens. My comment is that I see value in maybe harmonizing these. Right? And I actually think what we're tackling, it's great that we did this first step, but in doing so, I think I'm recognizing that it's a bit bigger of a lift to do it and to get it right. So I'm wondering if this is a space where we need to pull in some support on, at least maybe after we get a harmonized plan, to have some external support or expert review this for sufficiency and point out where it might be short, or you know what I mean? Because I have experience with this, but this is not my bailiwick.
It feels like the heavy lift sits on the board, right?
Yeah.
And so we're talking about, again, that window between event and emergency meeting.
Yeah.
And so I think that, just having a clear designated, we know this person by title because our, executive didn't wake up this morning,
Yeah.
unfortunately, right? It's that godforsaken event that informs us, or, if there's I'll say an unprofessional resignation, right? Or removal, we have an immediate course of action identified by position until we can convene. And, it feels like the lift is on us, not the execs, the heavy part.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right as far as ensuring that a succession plan is in place in case of an emergency. That is definitely on us. I think succession planning is also a part of every executive's good management of their function and their organization. And we are collapsing the two.
Gotcha.
Essentially, right? And I don't know if that's best practice, but we're trying to tackle them both simultaneously. So any other questions, comments?
Yeah, first off, I find value in the plan line of succession, Caitlin. I feel like there's more there of you sharing your experience, and like that's the part when I'm like listening, I'm like, that's where my head honed in. And I think that for me, like I would like to see an expansion of that, because you actually have the personal experience that can give us insight on like, hey, we as a board are looking at it from, this lens. Let me tell you how it is, collapsing it too.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about the plan line of succession as part of someone that gives whatever notice, and, we're not talking about longevity, I just would like you to, I don't know, just delineate a little bit more on that, on where the shortcomings were from that period of when, Steve left to you assumed like that time frame, because I feel like that's what you were trying to capture here and like give your experience. So that would be the only thing. Just more intrigued by that part.
Well, to clarify, I'm not sure that was necessarily my intent of the way that was written. I was just more of suggestion of how that would go, right? So I just want to clarify, but certainly, my research experience can inform that a little bit, I suppose. But yeah, that's fair. If there's, feedback taken, and I can expand on that a little bit.
That's it.
All right. Okay, thank you. We'll turn it over to special counsel.
This one I struggled with. I struggled with it based on the fact that my department is very small.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at one time we may have had 8 attorneys, now we're down to just 5. My position is an appointed position, unclassified, but everybody beneath me is a classified employee. So there's certain civil service rules that follow in terms of their promotions.
Right. That's what I was
Talking about, yeah,
So I am kind of like,
yeah.
and I won't say handcuffed in that regard, because of the size of the department, with it being small, we work closely together. The current lineup is you have the special counsel, and then there's 2 deputy special counsels. And then we have attorney 4s, which civil service requires a certain years of experience, and then level attorneys 2 and 3 and 1s. So because of the size and because of our relationship and how closely we work together, everybody pretty much knows what everybody else is doing. So in terms of succession, I can tell you when Yolanda was there, it was myself and Ed Morris, and we had weekly meetings with her. So we kind of like, and I guess that was as Randy pointed out, that unwritten succession plan.
Yeah.
So you kind of just knew that in the event that, and it's unsettling to hear people say people don't wake up in the morning, but yeah, that Ed or I could step in that spot. And everybody in the office felt comfortable with that, so did I. And I didn't think the 3 of us wouldn't wake up one morning. That just wouldn't be the case, but it could. But my point is, so when we talk about a succession plan, I kind of got one that's kind of baked in. It's kind of baked in. And, currently there's me, and certainly I could be there today, not tomorrow. Then there's Mary, and then I'm currently, maybe talking with Chanel about conditionally filling in my spot as I conditionally hold this spot. That's part of that discussion. That's part of that succession plan. When it comes to maybe executing documents, the way this is structured, and I think legally, there are certain documents that the special counsel's office is responsible for, but in the event that I can't do it, Randy can always sign the document.
Okay. So there's a redundancy in signature
Right.
authority.
Right.
Okay.
So, you don't have, and typically the routine documents that come through the office is usually my signature, and then it would be one of the deputies. And it could be either one, and that's sort of like that. In the event that somebody's not there, there's another one. But the rest of the team, and the deputies too, they're classified, but the rest of the team kind of just fall in line with that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I struggled with the succession plan because of the size, because it's sort of like baked in.
Yeah.
My question is, so highlighting the two in particular, Mary and Chanel, they're both Assistant Special Counsel 4?
Well, Mary is deputy special counsel.
She's already deputy
Yes,
special.
because the
Okay.
structure of the office was two.
Right.
And I was serving in that capacity until I accepted the interim special counsel, which has now left a vacancy there. And because this is all conditional, I kind of moved Chanel into that little spot to say,
Interim.
kind of, yes, well, yes, something like that. But that's to take that load off of me so I can do more of the,
Right.
or, get,
Is there anything that would prevent, and if we have to ask Dave, is there anything there's civil service that would prevent the deputy from moving in? I know it's our unwritten policy. Is there anything classification-wise that's missing that will allow that?
allow for the deputy to become the interim special counsel?
Yeah.
The city attorney.
Yeah. That's the other piece.
Because
and-
legally, the city attorney, under the law, under the law, the city attorney is the legal advisor to the Sewage and Water Board.
Right.
Who then in turns appoint a special counsel with the advice and consent of the board. So, yeah, there is a barrier to that.
So then my question becomes, do we need to get them involved? Because do they become the emergency special counsel in the event of an accident?
The way I would read the law, they would be.
That's why I bring
The
that
way I
up.
would read the law, it was because legally, the city attorney is the legal advisor.
Yeah.
In the event that I don't wake up one morning,
That's who has
that
the
would be
authority
that,
anyway.
that would be that void, right?
Yeah.
That would fill that gap until the
We
city
don't,
attorney.
that's
Right.
that's how, that's my,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Absolutely right.
So and the way I'm thinking about it is the authority sits with the city attorney and is delegated to your
Right.
role until someone is in your role, then there's no place for the delegated authority to sit, so it would go back, or it's always been with the city attorney. They would
Correct.
Just put someone in place, or she would, or he would, put someone in place in which to redelegate that authority.
Right.
So again, two different types of succession plans we're talking about. Immediate transfer of authority that the board pre-approves to take effect immediately until the board can act. But then succession planning to intentionally develop individuals or positions in the organization so that when there is a transition or a vacancy, there is someone who's already prepared to take on a role, non-emergency, right? But just being thoughtful about who's gonna transition into it. Sounds like you struggled with the first one, but the second one you're already doing.
Right.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. All right. So that is that with the 3 succession plans. Thoughts from the committee on how we move forward? I would suggest, we don't need to make a recommendation because this is a call from the board. We already made a recommendation to the board to require this or ask for this in a certain time period. So the executives would just go back to the board with your feedback. I would assume the committee can continue to consult and provide more feedback after this. Is there any thoughts on whether we want to continue to do feedback for another meeting cycle? Thoughts on, to me, I'll just tell you from my perspective, I think this is a really strong start, but I do think there needs to be some harmonization.
And we need time to do
We
that.
need a time to do it. I think we also need to maybe separate out and make very clear the emergency piece. And maybe that's the piece that moves first to the board. And then the various succession plans within your organization and the like is something that you continue to develop and refine over time. That's just my thought process. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really just looking for the emergency one, you know,
Like
sooner than later.
maybe 48, 72 hours.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. It took us maybe
Yeah.
2 days
Yeah.
Mhm.
last time.
I think about the President of the United States and how we kind of all learned
Mhm.
what happens if the president can't serve. There's like a very prescribed rule book on positions, and I mean, very, very prescribed. And that's what I'm thinking about.
Designated survivor.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
The only thing I would say is just access, making sure everybody has access to it and it lives in a place where all employees have access to, being able to see what those, because you guys are doing such great work with putting this together, is just making sure that everyone has access to this information once it's refined and kind of changed it, according to the language that you're looking for. It's just making sure they have access to that, because that's very important.
Yeah, socialized on it.
So that I'm clear, the KPIs, they're good enough for everyone to go ahead and finalize those, and they'll go to the board next week.
Right.
The succession plan, we're still working on that for both the emergency and the various positions in a non-emergency situation, but that's not due to the board next week. We'll have some time to develop that.
I think that, I mean, that's my view, is that you need more time and that
Yes.
we need to, we've learned that we need to divide these out, and that what the board is really asking for is the emergency succession plan that's harmonized, right? That's not specific to function. It's one emergency succession plan. And then, but you have all done the work to think about succession planning within the different departments, and I think that's worth continuing to invest in that process. But I'm not sure that's what we were asking for.
Yeah, I think the what I was looking for is the bad scenario outline.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I said, we know with height of our government who's sixth in line for the presidency, right? I think maybe not that deep down the line, but what happens in those emergencies?
Right.
And so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
Just
So
what
you're
happens.
looking for, when it comes to emergency, and that's the one we're working on first, you want one emergency succession plan, that we all may have input.
Yeah.
But it's one playbook.
One playbook that covers your top roles, this top layer of the organization. I would say, according to what the board asked for, that you should come back with something, or report, or request for more time, or what you've learned, and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? Because there was a timeline that was provided with that request. So I would say come back to the board next week and report out on what you have, and then ask for, if you needed additional time to do the steps that we've kind of discussed. And then the succession planning for your organizations, however, is very relevant, given the context that we're in and the state of the organization. So I would say maybe that is an ongoing consultative, thank you, process with this committee, as you would like to utilize us to come back and say, this is how we've laid out succession planning within the organization, but not necessarily something that the board has required.
So forgive me if I'm oversimplifying.
Yep.
But for me, it's really, I'm just looking for something really straightforward. Like, for example, special counsel, because to me, it's an
Easy one, yeah.
It pops back up to city attorney, but here's a document that can inform city attorney that we have 2 deputies.
Right.
And the way we rank those 2 deputies is based on work responsibility or tenure or some other metric that you decide.
Yeah,
And that's it.
and that's it.
I
But
don't-
but harmonized.
I don't want to go past that. And
Harmonized.
something comparable, right?
Yeah, I'm saying
Yeah,
harmonize it
that
into
that
one,
combines-
into one playbook.
Yeah.
I think Daryl just needs to develop a guide really for the city attorney, because like you
That's
said,
what I mean.
it's baked in. The city attorney's,
Yeah,
I mean, he or she could decide to replace you tomorrow, and we really wouldn't have a lot of say over that, correct?
yeah.
Mhm.
All right, so to state it clearly, one emergency succession plan / playbook that covers the top layer of the organization. Okay? And the playbook point is the frame that you're looking through when you're developing is, can someone pick this up and run the play? Okay. All right. So I don't think we need a motion. We can move on from there. And the last item on our agenda is the appointment of general superintendent and a review of compensation and committee recommendation if we want to do that. So with that, I'm going to, can you put our slide back up, please? I have so much to discuss. I laid this all out. Okay. I think this one's gonna go quick. Okay, so over the past several months, the committee and the board have had the opportunity to observe the interim general superintendent's leadership during a particularly challenging operational and governance environment. At the same time, the governance committee has been engaged in broader work around executive accountability, KPI development, succession planning, and governance continuity. One of the broader themes underlying the committee's work this year has been organizational continuity and stability. The utility has experienced significant executive turnover over time. I think we've had how many interim executive directors in the last 10 years? 10? Something like that. And from a governance and operational perspective, continuity and thoughtful transition planning are critical to long-term organizational effectiveness. So as a result, the committee has been working not only on executive evaluation frameworks and succession plans, but also on executive support and transition mechanisms intended to reduce disruption and allow the organization adequate time to prepare for leadership transitions when they occur. So at this time, I will ask the staff to, our CAO, if he's still around, there he is, to present the current comp structure and related information for the committee's discussion. And this is to review the existing comp structure for our interim general superintendent, because that is outside of an appointment recommendation. The other piece that we have to include is what the comp structure is going to be.
Great. All right, well, it's fairly simple and straightforward. I'll go over Ms. Caitlin Timrak's interim appointment and the salary structure that was agreed upon by the board of directors at that time. January 21st, there was a board resolution that designated Caitlin Timrak as the interim general superintendent. That resolution included a line on compensation, and it basically said, quite simply, that that the compensation would be the same as the outgoing general superintendent at the time. Compensation, benefits, and pension requirement, or pension related. I can read it to you if you want, but it pretty much said, yeah, Caitlin's going to get what the outgoing gets at this time. So that's so that at that time was the outgoing was at a base salary of and I'll read it all to you here, but it's base salary of $235,750. So that was that's what Caitlin's base would be in per the resolution. On top of that, Caitlin has earned 2 5% longevity increases, and I don't know if you're familiar with our longevity structure. Would you?
Is it 2 5% or 2 2.5?
I'm sorry, 2.5. I'm sorry. I'll try to explain that better. Our structure right now is for longevity. Any employee in the Sturgeon Water Board is eligible for a 2.5% increase at the 1-year mark, the 5-year mark, 10, 15, 20, 25, 5-year intervals. So Caitlin was at that time eligible for 2.5 longevity increases, a total of 5%. So If you take that against her base salary of $235,750, that equals $787.50. Adding that to her base salary, then it becomes an annual total salary of $247,537.50. $247,537.50 is what Caitlin is making right now. So that's per board resolution. So I was asked to do that so that I gave you a platform to work from as you go into the rest of this. In addition, the resolution indicated that she would receive the same leave accrual as the outgoing. The outgoing, there was an agreement with the previous that he would receive 18 days of leave per year. Normally, a board employee receives 13 days of leave a year. All board employees do. But that position it added another 5% or five days of leave. So Caitlin is accruing or will accrue leave over the next year at that rate, at 18.
That's paid time off, is that?
Paid time off, yeah. Annual leave is paid time off. We call it annual leave, but
Is there a separate sick leave?
there is a separate sick leave that was not addressed, and that's 13 days a year per year for any employee, and that was not addressed. No increase was given on sick leave. So her paid time off or annual leave is currently 18 days per year, vice the normal 13 days per year. There were no other provisions in terms of benefits. Everything is pretty standard, or was standard for her in terms of that in the resolution. So everything remained the same there. And the only other remaining item that I would explain as something to consider that you may want to consider in your discussion was there is a provision that allows professional certification pay for our employees, our exempt employees, meaning our salaried employees, who have earned a special certification that adds value to their position, basically. And that is, there are a lot of rules around that, by the way, civil service rules that say it's got to be a recognized organization has to sanction it. There's a lot of rules, bottom line. I won't get into them, but so that is something that Caitlin is eligible for in terms of her professional certification, which is a project management professional. Now, again, she's not being compensated for that. It's a 5% bump, and that wasn't considered. It can be considered as part of your compensation review, but it's available if you want to throw that into the mix as you discuss compensation. There are many employees that do receive that in the Sturgeon Water. We receive that 5% bump for their professional certifications. So those are the items that I wanted to lay the landscape out for. Was there anything else you'd like me to go into in terms of discussion?
No, that's it. I just wanted a review of the current compensation starting point. And you've basically reviewed what the board action was,
Yes,
right?
that's
And
correct.
just given us the details.
Yeah, that's
of what that actually meant.
very specifically in the resolution. So.
Yeah.
The 5% for professional certification, that's already a policy, or is it something that we?
No, it's a civil service. It's available. It's not. It's a civil service. It's part of the civil service pay plan.
Okay.
So it's available at the discretion of the appointing authority, which would be our organization. So it's not a mandatory thing. It's often requested and reviewed, and then sometimes granted. So, yeah, and you'll see it used across many of our exempt employees. So, yeah.
So, I just want to be very clear. In our review, we have an executive who's eligible for this.
Eligible for it, and again, because of her level, you can use, it's your discretion, basically. It's a discretion that whether you want to include that in the discussion. If you're looking at other issues around compensation, and I don't want to suggest anything, it's not my place to suggest that. It's just it's something that you can consider. There may be other ways you want to look at compensation,
Right.
in terms of that. So.
You clear?
Yeah, I'm clear.
Yeah. So in full transparency, I asked the questions and I'm still wrapping my brain around because if it's a civil service thing, right? If the mechanism is once you earn it, it's automatic, which it doesn't seem like it's automatic. You earn it, you become eligible, and then the executive has to, or the employee has to pursue it and pursue it to a body, whether that is their manager or the board or whomever, to get it activated. It seems like it's the latter is the
It is,
mechanism.
it is. It has to be requested.
Has to be
and it goes
requested.
through a process through HR, and through the department and then HR.
Okay,
And I want to be clear that that has never not been requested by Caitlin. So
Okay.
Be clear.
okay. So, and that eligibility was when? 2020?
Yes, so in my previous positions, that additional percentage was added to my base salary in my previous positions.
I see. Okay. So it's as you change positions, it becomes a eligibility, a bump that you're eligible for at each change in position.
But you're not, and again, it wasn't calculated into her pay this time.
Right.
And it was left out. And and you can only get it once, but it wasn't calculated into her pay.
Got it. Okay, understood. Any other questions on that? Yes.
Yeah. I'm bothered because I want to make sure I'm hearing this right, because what I'm hearing is the same way you only get 1 year and 5-year tenure once, but the 2.5% is calculated for the duration, and that's cumulative.
It is, it becomes,
Right.
Once you receive your longevity, it becomes.
It's cumulative. It does
And
not.
raises the base, basically, or it raises the, raises.
And it doesn't go away because you
No,
got a
it's not.
promotion or something else.
No.
So I'm trying to find the difference between that program of civil service and this program, because if she was eligible before to get a 5% raise.
Yeah, it was left out of her calculation when she became interim general superintendent. It was not included, so.
And to be clear,
She was granted a new,
the resolution from the board said to give what was in play for the previous person holding
Right.
that role. We did not specify any longevity, anything. So the longevity was something that was added on.
Right, that's a normal process for us, because that's earned by the employee, that is earned by the.
But that's what I'm saying. How's this different? That's what I'm
Yeah,
waiting to hear.
well, and again, I think it probably should have been part of the discussion at the time.
Okay.
But it wasn't, and again, at this point, it can either be considered or not when you come in, if you're considering a permanent appointment, you can consider it, or if you don't have to. It's
Again, we didn't have this opportunity to weigh in on the longevity. She earned it.
Yeah.
How have we not been paying it? I'm still waiting to hear.
I think that's the challenge. I think Director Kennedy is pointing to a look back that said perhaps there was, and I'm saying this on the record, perhaps there was earned income that was not paid out. And so we need to understand whether or not that should have been automatically applied or not. And let's just look into it and be clear.
Yeah.
And then if it is, then we need to make the adjustment, however we can make the adjustment. Moving forward, however, then I think we would want to make sure executives receive whatever pay increases they are entitled to. And I think that's.
Well, and I would just say that, yeah, there are several different professional certifications out there that may or may not add to that person's positions, the effectiveness of the individual. So that's why they're individually requested by the employee.
Yeah,
So,
but she has had it applied.
and it has applied in her past. yeah.
Right, so she's gone through the vetting process of that already. Okay, so for the sake of time, let's move past it. So you've heard the existing compensation structure and package for our interim general superintendent as activated by resolution from the board. This committee has been speaking about tying our compensation to measurable goals and outcomes and having more accountability for our executives and the like, since we took on the evaluation framework exercise back in fall of 2025. And so with those things in mind, there is now a proposed framework that I want to go over with the committee that pulls some of that work forward. you'll see it on the slide. So we have these 5 sort of considerations in our exec compensation and continuity framework. The first is the defined base compensation that we just talked about. So it reflects the base number plus whatever other operational city service additions that would go with that. And we want to make sure the base reflects the scope and operational complexity of the role for the executive. Then there's the KPI-linked compensation, which is the new concept for the committee to consider. This is an adjustment opportunity that's tied to achievement against those adopted executive goals and KPI metrics. And in particular, when we have the doesn't meet, meets, exceeds, the current proposal looks like doesn't meet, no change, no adjustment, meets a small, very small adjustment, and then exceeds a larger but still modest adjustment in percentage. I have talked about a 0 to 5, but the committee can recommend whatever they want to recommend. Also to that, and David, you have this information, we've looked at a range of base compensation for roles similar to Caitlin's role across comparable utilities in the United States. And so, David, do you want to talk about that real quick?
Sure. Short of a complete salary study, which I will also tell you that when procurement releases the RFP for our class and comp study, the executives, include the entire leadership team, is a specified area of that study that's going to be looked at, including the GSO position. So we're looking forward to seeing that happen, and that's a full-blown study. So we'll hopefully see numbers. But short of that, what I really only had available to me was the ability to go and look at AWWA compensation studies, which is reputable, and it's what we use a lot. So across their numbers, basically it ended up looking at comparable positions. And again, I will tell you that our general superintendent position isn't specifically defined in the AWWA study. There's a couple of positions. One's called top maintenance and operations professional, and the other one's called top engineering executive. So if you smash the two together, one of them applies a little more than the other, but you smash the two together, you end up with a range that looks like essentially 235,000 to 275,000. Honestly, that was where this body ended up getting to, I think, inside the whatever you all did anyway. So maybe you looked at the AWW stat. I don't know.
Yeah.
You did. So okay.
And
So
it is tough
so
to-
I guess basically my work just kind of validated your work. But
We interpreted it the same way.
yeah. So I think you're fairly solid on 235 to 275 right now for the range. And again, we'll let our class comp study when it's done. Let it inform that too. Maybe there'll be more information available to.
I know that's not procured yet, and it's on the way. But
It's
that's-
pending RFP release, so
That's still a 2026 deliverable, though, right?
we want to get it done before the end of the year.
Yeah.
When we have a very specified aggressive timeline within the RFP, if we can, if we're getting close to release, I know procurement's dotting i's and crossing t's right now, so.
Yeah. Okay, yep, no problem. So to go back to the KPI link compensation adjustment opportunity, that is within a range, right? So we did not want to start the bottom of the range lower than where our executive currently is, right? So the floor is the existing 235, and then we did not want to see these bumps if we have an executive that exceeds expectations every year for the next 5 years. We didn't want to then just have a compensation that just keeps going and going and going for obvious context issues or context challenges. And so we want to keep compensation within the range within the market. So 235 to 275, and she would be able to continue to accrue increases in salary up until she hit that ceiling, and then we would not. Now, I want to now turn to Director Kennedy to discuss an alternative deposit place for that additional bump. I think the thought process would be at each opportunity for an adjustment, the executive would be able to choose whether that adjustment would go to their regular paycheck for the following year, or whether it would be placed in this alternative.
There is a defined contribution
Right,
executive
this-
comp plan
The executive
that we
comp.
inquired about last year.
Yeah.
There's currently not one in place. And so the option is what you're discussing.
Yeah, exactly, to be able to put funds there or to put it into salary up until you get to the top of the range, and then it would be mandatory for it to go into this executive retirement plan. Okay, so you want to talk more about the retirement plan, to refresh for new directors that weren't around?
Sure. So when I showed up, I realized, one, we didn't have an executive comp plan. Two, the evaluation of executive director just involved, do we give them a raise every year? And it's very subjective. And so not just welcoming in the transparency and accountability of the KPI program introduced by Director Scruggs, but I think it further supports having an executive comp plan as a viable option to receive any earned increase, but not at the discretion of the board, the discretion of the executive, right? And so this would be definitely tailored for the three executives that we oversee. Dave, we'll have to have further conversation, because I think any highly compensated employee would be eligible if they wanted to participate. But that's a program that's, it's got some legs now, and we'll share it with you when it crosses the finish line.
Yeah. And just, can you give us just, where does it sit as far as board decision? Is it something that a committee advanced? Has the board voted to put it in place? Where does it sit in the process?
Well, so coming out of this was one of the reasons I asked about the compensation committee, because this, again, as we talked about the ever-expanding lift of governance committee, this kind of further illustrates, I think, why we need that additional committee. And so this plan would be, I'm sorry, you had a specific question.
Yes, my specific question is basically, is it something that we can operationalize, or that we can put in as a definite mechanism available now because it has received board approval and the organization has signed off on its use? Or is it in the process?
It's in the process. It will
Okay.
take some months to manifest. And so after meeting with procurement, meeting with HR, meeting with special counsel, it's in the process. If you're familiar with any Section 162 executive comp plans, this is standard, in other places. We don't see it too often in New Orleans, but there are other agencies that do have these plans.
Okay. All right, so I'm assuming we will have opportunity to have more robust discussion about the comp plan as it moves through the process. That would make it probably something we couldn't bake into with certainty into the compensation metrics at this point, because it's not
Correct.
available for utilization. But the thought would be that what we can control, which is additions and adjustments to the base compensation, until such time that this option comes into play, and then the executive can choose which way to go. But at 275, or at the top of the range, then it would mandatorily go to some other retirement plan or other location, or not, or if we don't have that, it would not be available. Now, that said, if the market changes and the range changes, then I think the organization has a responsibility to make adjustments to the range, right? So there's that. And of course, the board can at any point decide it wants to change any of these metrics. But what we hope is that we're so thoughtful in the process that boards moving forward will feel comfortable with maintaining the structure and just making adjustments as inflation and the other things come into play. Okay, outside of the KPI linked piece, and we talked about the retirement allocation piece, we want to talk about professional development support. We have discussed as a committee making sure that we invest in our executives, both in the ways that they request but also the ways that we might require according to the context that they're working in, right? And so what that might look like is investment directly from existing organizational budget that our executive director has purview over, and the board providing some input on how that budget might be used. That could also look like specific funds allocation or requirements from the board that can come from whatever funding sources that we identify. So it doesn't just have to come from the ED budget, but my understanding is that there is budget capacity for this type of work. But down to the last bucket or the last box, the continuity and transition stability provision. These are provisions like a notice provision. Please give us 90 days notice before you vacate the position. An enforcement provision that says if you don't and it's not for these sorts of reasons, then any investment that we make in your development, you have to pay that back for a certain percentage. And these are not novel ideas. These are kind of standard ideas. We floated some other novel ideas that we thought maybe were a little too radical. And so the one that's kind of coming to the table is where we make professional development investment, then improper notice and departure comes with some level of responsibility for repayment to be phased out over time, right? Okay, so that's pretty much it for the compensation framework. Let me open the floor for any other discussion, comments, or the like.
I know you discussed Iowa, the peer group is nationwide, similar positions. How many of those positions were housed in Louisiana in the regional area?
I know that information's in the study. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but it's, yeah.
Very
There's
few.
not a lot, but they list out the actual database they reach to for the information. They list out the utilities. But yeah,
I think regionally, you got a little better with like the Southeast region.
Southeast region, I think, is where you're gonna have to go for comp, in terms of regional comp, but there weren't a lot, but there were some, well, not a lot.
And then the development of the range. So what did we use? 25th, 50th, 75th percentile? Like what did we use for that?
So the way they've got it arranged is a bottom end and a top end, and use 50%. I'm using 50%. Yeah, you can do the 75th percentile, but I think that's listed in there. But I think that kind of throws things off a little bit. Just the way I was looking at it, I thought it was easier, I think, to understand when you use the bottom and top end and a mid range. So that's kind of how they got it listed out, and I think that's what you all looked at prior to. I can show you that. I can give you a copy of that if you want to see
Yes,
what it
please.
looks like. Yeah.
It's just that's.
Because I know you're kind of an HR nerd.
I know. That spread is tight.
I
That's
say
why I
that
was
with much,
listening.
that's a term of endearment. HR nerd is a term of endearment.
That's it.
More questions, thoughts? I know you get tired. We're almost done. Okay, so the only thing that we have left to discuss is the fitness and professional competence and the like and character of the interim candidate, which is appropriate for executive session. So may we have a motion to enter executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been properly moved in seconds. Any discussion? Public comment? All those in favor? Any nays or abstentions? Motion carries. We are now in executive session. have a motion to exit executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
None from.
All right, public comment?
No public comment, Chair.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? None. Okay, I have two motions for this body to consider before we adjourn. The first, a motion to recommend appointment of the interim general superintendent as general superintendent, subject to board approval and finalization of employment terms.
So moved.
It's not my committee.
Second.
Thank you. Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Is there public comment?
No public comment, Chair.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All right, and the final is the motion to recommend approval of a compensation and employment framework for the general superintendent position incorporating base compensation, KPI-linked evaluation and compensation methodology, optional retirement allocation mechanisms related to earned compensation adjustments, continuity and transition planning provisions, and executive development support considerations, subject to final legal review and board approval.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, public comment?
No public comment, Chair.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All righty. Well, that concludes our meeting. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any public comment on adjournment?
No public comment, Chair.
All those in favor?
Aye.
No nays or abstentions? We are adjourned. Good job, y'all.